This is CNN Breaking News.
These were the scenes earlier in the day in Cairo. Today, similar scenes in Alexandria and Suez. Elsewhere in Egypt, the protests escalating, the hatred of the Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak evident by these protesters, thousands of them taking to the streets. The White House reaction to the breaking news in Egypt, a senior administration official reacting to President Mubarak's speech just a little while ago, calling it, and I'm quoting now, hardly conciliatory and highly disappointing. That from a senior U.S. official. The official adding, it's clear Mubarak thinks he can ride this out, and says, quote, we're not so sure that is the right assumption. Blunt talk from a senior Obama administration official. Let's get some more now on the political implications of all of this. Our chief political correspondent, Candy Crowley, is here in the Situation Room. Candy, I'm going to play a little clip of what the president said in Cairo, that big speech he gave back in June 2009. Listen to this.
So no matter where it takes hold, government of the people and by the people sets a single standard for all who would hold power. You must maintain your power through consent, not coercion. You must respect the rights of minorities and participate with a spirit of tolerance and compromise. You must place the interests of your people and the legitimate workings of the political process above your party. Without these ingredients, elections alone do not make true democracy.
So some people are looking at that speech, Candy, and saying, you know what, he may have planted a seed as to what's going on right now.
Well, he certainly grabbed hold of what was going on there, because this is not particularly new. I think obviously the level of it is, but we have long known that there was unrest in Egypt because this is an authoritarian, very often repressive government. And remember that the president had in that room with him dissidents. He had they had invited in members of labor. They had invited in members of the Brotherhood of Muslims. So yeah, they were quite aware of what was going on, and that they were speaking to two different places. They were speaking to the street, and they were speaking to the halls of power in Cairo. So it wasn't exactly prescient, but it certainly did frame what was going on in Cairo at that time and what is going on quite visibly right now.
We're expecting, by the way, President Obama to be making a statement momentarily. We've just been told by the White House that the president will speak on this very crisis right now within the next 5 minutes or so. We expect to hear from the president, so we will, of course, bring that to our viewers here in the United States and around the world. We'll get his reaction to what's going on. It sort of reminds me, and you remember this well, during the political campaign in 2008, when Hillary Clinton was running for the Democratic nomination. She wondered about that 3 a.m. phone call. Who do you want to be taking that phone call? This is one of those game changers in the world right now, potentially what's going on in Egypt. In the world, yes, and less about internal U.S. politics, more about global politics. Because, look, this is a problem in Egypt and in other countries, Jordan, Saudi Arabia. You have these leaders who are not exactly bastions of democracy, but who nonetheless are helpful to the United States. I mean, Hosni Mubarak has kept a cold peace with Israel for decades. He has been the conduit through which we talk to other less friendly Arab nations. He has also been helpful in the war on terrorism. So, you know, you make a deal with who can help you and who can protect the United States. And for decades, that has been Hosni Mubarak. Now, you know, when you see this sort of things in the street and you understand that these passions that you've known were simmering have now boiled over, you pretty much have to look at what is going to be a new reality in Egypt, and what are you going to, you know, who's next? And that's really the big question, because if Hosni Mubarak goes, who then comes in and who can play that role? And look, Egypt has also been very strong anti-Iran. So I imagine that there's probably no one happier at this point than the leadership in Iran looking at what's going on. And we're waiting for the President of the United States to speak. This is a serious moment for the President of the United States to show leadership, but I suspect that a lot of U.S. officials think it also underscores the limits of U.S. power, how much influence the United States can have in affecting what happens on the streets of the major cities of Egypt.
Exactly, and I think that's why you've seen everyone says, well, why hasn't the president spoken so far? I mean, this has been going on for a couple of days, because you got to wait and see what happens. You cannot control Hosni Mubarak, and you cannot control what's going on in the streets in Cairo and Alexandria and elsewhere. So the fact of the matter is, the U.S. has to maneuver around what's happening, because it really can't shape what's happening. Certainly, it's sent messages to Mubarak over the course of the last couple of days about, look, let this remain peaceful and that kind of thing. But the fact of the matter is that you cannot control the kind of passion that you're seeing now. You've got to try to shape it so that on the other end of it, the U.S. comes out in a palatable position.
And the President Mubarak was at the White House not that long ago, a few months ago, and they had what U.S. officials described as very good meetings, but obviously not necessarily perfect meetings. You know, some analysts have suggested this is similar to what happened in Iran in '79. The Shah of Iran was a close U.S. ally, but flawed. And a lot of people in Iran did not like him. And, of course, he was overthrown. There was a revolution. We know what happened then, and it became very, very obvious. But as bad as the Shah was, from the U.S. perspective, what followed was even worse. Decades of leadership by the Ayatollahs in Iran. And some U.S. officials have said to me over the past few days, they're deeply worried, as flawed as Mubarak is, they don't know what's going to happen next.
Sure, it's the what-if question. What if the U.S. had interfered more? What if the U.S. had pumped up the Shah and said, yeah, you know, take to the streets, force this revolution back? Would we be dealing with the Iran we're dealing with now? Well, the fact of the matter is, you know, the world isn't made of what-ifs. It's made up of what did you do then. But you're right. I think I've heard that from more than one person today saying, boy, this just reminds me of what's gone on, what went on in Iran. What are we going to get next? And that's what they're talking about at the White House.
Fran Townsend, our Homeland Security contributor, is here as well, former Homeland Security advisor to President Bush. We're standing by the president. You can see the live picture over there. He's going to be speaking from the White House momentarily. We'll get his reaction to President Mubarak's speech to the nation just a little while ago and what's going on, what's next for the U.S. But take us behind the scenes. You served in the White House for many years. This is one of those really, really delicate moments.
That's right. There's enormous pressure on the president. What people don't understand, you know, whether we're talking about Egypt or Pakistan, we have these allies we give tremendous amounts of military and foreign aid to, but they don't always do what we want them to do. And the answer is, but they do some of the really important things for us. And when a president is confronted with a dictator who he may not agree with on human rights policy or political and democratic freedoms, but helps us protect the American people in the war on terror, he makes compromises. And so they're going to measure their words very carefully here. The fact that President Obama has not called President Mubarak speaks volumes, and that message will not be lost in Egypt. The fact that President Mubarak has called out the army and how they will react now in this near term after his speech will also be very important. And the president, they will be measuring right now very carefully the words the president chooses to use. It's one thing when the Secretary of State comes out. It's another thing when the President of the United States
the whole
speak.
world will be watching. The world was watching President Mubarak. Certainly the people of Egypt were when he spoke shortly after midnight, a local time in Cairo and Alexandria. And now we're getting ready, we're told momentarily, for the President of the United States to address the U.S. nation, indeed the world, on what's going on. Let me bring in Fred Pleitgen, who's watching all of this unfold. It's now approaching 1:30 a.m. in Cairo. Fred, tell our viewers if the demonstrations outside your window there, where you're based, are continuing or if it's quieted down.
They are still continuing, Wolf, but they're not quite as large as they were last time we spoke. It seems that people are dispersing a little bit, at least. And one of the things that you can always see here in these demonstrations, that people will come somewhere, but once the military shows up, it does tend to diffuse the situation quite quickly, because the military is an institution that just has so much respect here among the people. And it was very interesting to see when the military sort of rolled in here earlier today. They were being celebrated by the people. And the people were chanting, the people and the military, we are one. So certainly this is a much more respected institution than the other security forces, especially, of course, the police here in Egypt. But there are still people here on the streets. They're still quite angry, of course, at what they've heard from President Hosni Mubarak. And I can tell you that there will be a lot of Egyptians also waiting to hear what the U.S. president has to say about the situation, because that's one of the things that people keep telling me again and again and asking me again and again is, what is the American president saying about this? What is America saying about all this? Clearly, they want to know where America stands because they believe it is going to be very, very important to their future. Wolf?
Fred, I know that they've really shut down effectively much of the internet and the social networking sites like Twitter and Facebook. But what about television? Is Egyptian state television showing any of this to the people there? I assume that folks can still get Al Jazeera, El Arabiya, and CNN International.
Yes, I mean, obviously, we're all showing this, but yeah, it was quite interesting to see that. Yes, the Egyptian state television also did show that the protests were going on. It was something that many people here in Egypt found to be very, very remarkable because it is something that normally isn't the case here in this country. But it happened throughout the day that they were showing what was going on here on the streets. There were even some comments quite critical of the Egyptian president. So certainly, yes, this is something that people here are able to follow on TV. And it really, there is no chance to black out what's going on here in this country right now. I mean, it's all on all international challenges, on all international channels. So it's virtually impossible to stop that from coming out, which is why it was so strange for the Egyptian security forces to try and harass us, to try and harass other television networks, thinking that maybe they could stop the coverage of what's going on here on the streets, because clearly that wasn't going to be the case, Wolf.
All right, Fred, stand by. I want everyone to stand by. The President of the United States will be addressing the nation on Egypt momentarily. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll hear from President Obama.